Hello, and welcome to the User Management Training. Today we will be discussing how to set up users for success. To begin with, what is user management? User management is your staff's day-to-day interaction with the site, with your instance of LegalServer. Much like within your organization, there will be different levels of access and groupings among your staff within LegalServer. Today's training will focus on what exactly that means. So what is user management? When discussing user management, it's important to keep these 4 initial questions in mind. Is this individual a user or a contact? That is to say, should they be able to log in the site? Do they need to keep time? If you answered no to either or both of those questions, chances are you're looking at a contact. This is different from a user, as users will have the ability to keep time, log in, and generally view things on different levels within the instance of LegalServer. 2. User roles. What work will they do? Are these users responsible for other staff at your organization? Do they need to just build reports, and that is their primary focus, their primary role? Are they day-to-day advocates handling cases under your organization? Or are they with another organization? 3. Permissions. What restrictions should this individual have? Temporary staff, such as students or interns and pro bono advocates, may not need full access to the site. Is there any information they should not be able to see once they log in? And number 4, access. What is their level of access? What exactly should they be able to do? After today's session, we want listeners to walk away knowing what different user roles are and where to go to update permissions for each. We also want listeners to be able to create a user, manage user role permissions, and update permissions on processes. Finally, our goal is to help you feel more comfortable updating user information, navigating permissions, and controlling which users can access data in LegalServer. To start, we have user role permission. User roles determine the level of access someone should have in LegalServer. This controls what top-level tabs, processes, and profiles the individual will be able to see and interact with. These permissions allow you to manage internal and external access to LegalServer, along with which top-level tabs should be viewable. Again, both internally and externally. Finally, user role permissions can be managed per process and profile, determining which users per user role can access the information or view the information once they have logged in. On your instance of LegalServer, you may see a Users tab here. Navigating to the Users tab takes us into the Users section front, where we can access the Actions menu, see user role permissions, and we also have the ability to create or delete new user roles here. Clicking the Edit User Role Permissions will take us into a list of the existing user roles in the site. We can pull up the Administrator user role and the Pro Bono Restricted Access user role to see the differences there. Our first tab here is for administrators. If you are watching today's training, chances are you may be an administrator at your organization. The permissions you have will vary based on your organization and what was determined appropriate for you to have. But traditionally, the administrator will have the top level of access within the site. As you can see here, there are a number of boxes checked off, allowing such permissions across LegalServer. This will compare to the pro bono restricted access user role, which we see in this tab here. As we scroll through the internal permissions for the pro bono restricted access user role, you may notice that there are far fewer boxes checked here, giving far less permissions to processes and the ability to edit information or even just add information into the site. The pro bono restricted access user role will typically have the least amount of permissions when logging in. If we scroll down on the page a little, we're able to edit external permissions for use with internal/external IP address ranges per user role. What this does is control external access to your instance of LegalServer and what exactly can be accessed from that external IP address. To add in an external IP address, we'll open up this hyperlink in a new tab. Here, we can add in IP addresses to this range, identifying them as exceptions or the IP addresses that should have access to the items checked in the external permissions portion that we've seen on the previous page. If you're looking to add in an IP address or range here, make sure to click Continue to save that response or that entry and add it to the list below. Beneath the external permissions, you'll have the ability to update viewable navigation tabs, again, both internally and externally. As we are still on the pro bono restricted access user role, you'll see that the viewable navigations, both internally and externally, are very restricted. This compares again to the viewable navigation tabs for our site administrator. The last options on the page here allow us to edit the viewable user stripe items, the main profile being the case profile that this individual is directed to by default, and the home section front, what they see when they log into the site. If you make any changes to this page, again, you will want to click the Continue to save the selections that you have made. Creating a new user, the process, terms, and things to consider. System information, how the user will interact with the site. When first creating a user in the system information is the first bit of information you'll need to include for that user. It helps to write down the answers to the questions you see here, as they will come up again when creating the user. And it's always good to document your findings and why you came to the conclusion that you did for creating the user under the specific user role for which it has been assigned. You'll want to consider if the user is ready to access the site. Should their login be active? You'll also want to consider if the user should appear when making case assignments. On the front end side of things, when creating a new case in the system, we're going through an applicant intake process. At some point, you have the ability to recognize who the primary assignment should be. You can also add assignments from the case profile once a case has been accepted. The individuals that appear in that list for options to assign the case to all have the current equals yes option selected on the user side within their system information. Does this user work with or for your organization? Should they be a staff member, or are they a pro bono assignment or pro bono advocate or attorney? What level of access should this user have? What should their user role be? And optionally, date access should start and expire for the site. As site administrators, you have the ability to suspend access after an end date has been recognized and not allow access until the start date is upon us. This comes in handy for temporary advocates or interns, such as summer interns or summer attorneys. Back on the site, we can navigate back to the top-level Users section front by clicking the Users tab here. From this tab, we can access the Actions menu, where we have this first option here to add in new users. You'll notice that this process contains 4 steps or forms. We cannot click ahead in these steps or forms, but as we add in information, we will be able to navigate backwards to update the information that we have recorded so far. The system information here is what we just discussed. When it comes to the username, it helps to have a naming convention within your organization. That means you have a set way of identifying what the username for your user should be. Some folks will use the email address for an example. So if our email was, say, dannyhill@legalserver.org, we can remove everything after the @ and the @ essentially giving me my username, similar to my email address. We can set the login active here, recognizing that this individual should be able to log into the site. We can also set their current status here to yes, identifying that they are ready to accept cases and case assignments. We can also identify that their contact should be active here. This will create a contact profile for this individual. It will also allow them to be added to the contact section of a process or form, typically recognized through the recipients box. It is important to note that while this will create a contact in the system for this user, contacts are not automatically users in the system. You can have a contact unassociated to any users. If your user has an active contact, as defined here, they will have a contact profile. Advocate user type here allows you to group this individual internally. So you can say that they're a staff or a pro bono advocate, maybe they're a contractor. The list here is fully within your control. Next up is the user role. Finally, we can select office, program, a start date. Let's say they started at the beginning of the year here, and an end date. Let's say they only plan to be with the organization for the next year. They have a big move coming up and they know for a fact that they just won't be here after that. So we can say 12/31/2025, their access should expire. Clicking continue saves that information, creating that contact or that user record. The next step of the process here allows us to collect contact information for the user that we just created. Here we'll be able to identify that full name for the individual. So we can say Danisha Doe, because some level of mystery is great. We can also record the email address here, which is a required field when creating a new user. Since we don't specifically have an email address, I'll put in a temporary or fake one here. We can record a work phone and cell phone with the ability to track any notes there as well. And we can bind the work address to the organization, where if we select no, we can record their work address here. Or we can select yes and identify an organization affiliation on the next page of this process. Optionally, we can set the organization affiliation here. If we did not want to set the organization affiliation, we would click this button here, collapsing the list of fields to address. If we wanted to add in an organization affiliation, it would pull from the list of active organizations in the system. You would also be required to record a start date for that organization affiliation here. I'm not going to set that today. I'm just going to click continue here. The final step of the process allows us to set a temporary password or permanent password, although we do encourage temporary passwords when setting up accounts for other users. If you did not need to set a password, this user will not need to log in. They just need that user account. You can set this to do not set password and click continue. There may be password requirements set up on the back end of your system, requiring a certain number of characters, numerical values, or symbols within the password here. So that would be something to check and keep in mind when assigning the password. To make that password temporary, you'll need to update this here Boolean field to yes, recognizing that the user will need to change their password upon that initial login. Since this is not a real user, we won't be setting a password today. That takes us into the user profile, where we can see information that we've recorded for the user. And as they interact with the site, we'll be able to see that information as well. This includes their assignments, any timekeeping entries, extra information, their org or organization affiliation history, and a general user log as they log in and out of the site. When it comes to controlling which users have access to certain processes or profiles in LegalServer, you'll want to control that through the top level admin button. Here, you can search for your processes, forms, and profiles. Navigating to that page will bring up a list of processes by default on the Cases Matter section front. You can edit all dynamic processes from this page here by updating the module you wish to view that process in. If the process is not dynamic, you may not be able to edit it. From the list of processes here, we can access the pencil icon to jump into the back end. If we scroll down on this page just a little to the second section here, we see the permissions, which we can update by going into the drop-down list and identifying any new permission level that the role should have. If you create a new user role in the site, they will appear here based on the default permissions you established when creating that user role. Any selections or changes you make to the permissions here will need to be saved at the bottom of the page via this Continue button. If we jump back to our processes, forms, and profiles, we can also access profiles here, where we can click the pencil icon on a profile and expand the permissions there to allow users to either see or not see the information on that profile, similar to the processes across your instance of LegalServer. And again, any changes or selections made, you'll want to click the Continue or the Save and Stay on Page button to lock in that selection. The Supervisor. An example of all the things we discussed today would be a supervisor, a user role that doesn't typically come with the site, meaning that you would have to create one. If we go into our user section front here, navigating to the user section front, we can go into the Actions menu and again, either create or delete a user role here. We'll also be able to see the existing user roles in the system, where I have already created the supervisor user role. Clicking the user role from the list view below has brought it into the top section of this page here, essentially turning the creation page into an edit process. Once you've established the role in the system, you can edit the permissions for the role. We've jumped back to the user section front where you would be able to go into the Edit User Role Permissions, access the new supervisor user role you've made, and edit the permissions there. You may also want to create a separate home profile or section front for cases for this user role, as the information they may need to see may vary from the information, say, an assignment may need to see. If we scroll down, you'll notice that I have updated the home section front to the supervisor view. What this may look like in the system, jumping over to our home section front here. Since I am an administrator in the site, I was able to add in the home section front for supervisors as an alternate view for administrators, meaning that I can go to the Views menu here to see the supervisor view, essentially what your supervisors see when they first log in. This view has been compiled of a variety of list views, reporting on information regarding the supervisees. You can have report parts here, like we see, in either that list view or another additional display format. We can also add in the charts that we generate from the report. What lives in these tabs and on this list view is completely up to you.